Turkey just had elections, and we have surprising results. I'll tell you what that means in a second. So let me give you context first. Right now, the president of Turkey is Tayyip Erdogan. He used to be the prime minister. Turkey has a parliamentary system where the prime minister is more powerful than the president. Now, Erdogan would like to change that because he's not the prime minister anymore. He's the president. In order to do that, he needs more solid majorities in parliament for his party so they can change the constitution and say, yeah, we didn't mean the prime minister. We meant the president has all the power, right? And he'd like to stay in power longer because God knows what happens if he gets out of power and people find out what he actually did. Now, one way to find out would be to have a strong media there. That's exactly why he has crushed the media in Turkey. I'll get to that in a second as well. So now, problem for Erdogan is that the last elections they had in June, it didn't work out so well for him and his party. It turns out AKP, that's his party, lost a lot of seats. They no longer held a majority by themselves. A party that is considered more leftist and pro-Kurdish picked up a lot of seats, and the secular parties picked up seats. Erdogan's party is a little bit more fundamentalist, I'm putting it mildly there, right? And certainly more religious. Now, they decided, I don't like that election result, so let's have what they call a snap election. So in a parliamentary system, this can happen more, right? And so they call for a new election, and bad news for Erdogan and his guys. Turns out that they're polling at about the same place as the June election, so it looks like they're not going to have their majority, and those other parties are going to do just as well as they did last time around. And then they have the election, and surprise! It turns out that Erdogan's party got the majority back. That is quite a surprise. Now there's a lot of people wondering in Turkey how the polling was so wrong. There's some chance that the polling wasn't so wrong. Now, of course, the government entity charged with telling you what the polling results were, their website was down right after the election, and it continued to be down for a long time. Oof. Golly gee, that tricky website. Now, wait a minute. If their website is down, how do you know what the vote percentages were? Actually, in this election, they announced who won quicker than any other election, and certainly than the last election, right? So they immediately knew who won. They just couldn't show you any of the votes, right? Okay. So Huffington Post explains the election results have stunned pollsters and political scientists who had predicted roughly the same result as in June. Instead, voter support for AKP increased dramatically. Okay, yeah. I guess the pollsters are stunned because they didn't expect that perhaps what people actually thought in a democracy might not matter. Now, you remember in a previous election, AKP had had a mysterious giant national blackout in all these different cities at the same time during the elections. Now, I say AKP had done that because they were in charge, they were the government. And when asked about that giant blackout that happened to affect all these places, where later, when they tallied the votes, they had gained a tremendous number of votes in those particular areas, higher than earlier percentages. They said, oh, we had that blackout because a cat walked into an electric generator and caused the blackout. Wait, how did that one cat cause the blackout in all the different cities throughout Turkey? Like that website being down. These mysteries will never be solved, I guess. Part of the reason they won't be solved is because of things like this. This past week, the week before the election, Turkish police seized the offices of 2 Turkish opposition newspapers using water cannons and tear gas. On Friday, after their staff was fired, both media outlets published pro-government front pages. Now, this is not the first time Erdogan and his party have done this. They've systematically crushed the media in Turkey. We even have leaks when they're on the phone talking to the different newspapers and television stations, telling them, how dare you have anyone write against us? There will be consequences. In one particularly sad case, the person running a newspaper, one of the leading newspapers in Turkey, is crying on the phone with Erdogan, saying, I'm so sorry for what I've done. I'll get back in line. So, hey, look at this. They do a little tear gas on a couple of remaining publications that weren't not under sufficient control, and voila, they come out with a pro-government position and fire all their staff who oppose Erdogan. Does this sound like a democracy to you guys? Now, one of the things Erdogan had done was say, oh my God, the PKK, that's a Kurdish terrorist group in Turkey. They're coming for you, they're coming for you. And the only way you can save Turkey is supporting a strong father figure like me. Where have I seen this movie before? Russia, Israel, Dick Cheney, and many other places in history as well. They're attacking us. We've got to go get the others, right? Now, there was a series of bombings, some of which mysteriously had no security at those places at all. In fact, let me give you a couple of quotes about that. One particularly gruesome bombing that had over 100 people killed in a pro-peace Kurdish rally. And it wasn't just Kurds there, it was pro-peace movement. While the government placed blame on the so-called Islamic State group, many Turks scoffed at the claim, instead saying the government itself orchestrated the attack or allowed it to happen in order to sway voter opinion. Okay, now look, did the government do? I don't know. That's a heavy charge. You'd have to have a lot of evidence to prove it out, right? When government speakers are at rallies, they have tremendous security. The pro-peace rally with Kurds and leftists that don't agree with the government had almost no security. Ambulances were blocked from going to help the victims of the bombing. Okay. And then the AKP, Erdogan's party, said, meanwhile, many AKP supporters say they believe that ISIS and PKK joined forces in terrorism. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the region, let me explain. ISIS fights the Kurds in Iraq and Syria. They hate them. They despise them. The Kurds maybe hate ISIS more than they hate anyone else. The idea that ISIS and PKK, which is a Kurdish group, got together to do bombings of peace rallies in Turkey, well, that does strain the imagination. Okay. Now, those are not the only people that they're saying are in cahoots and working against the Erdogan government. They also say that media organizations that don't agree with them and that dare to point out anything they're doing wrong are, of course, working with the Western governments in a ploy against them and are terrorists. It doesn't have to make sense. They just have to declare it, right? So this election has been declared for AKP and Erdogan's party. They say they have the majority. And so no matter what the polls said and what the Turkish people wanted, well, they're the ones in charge. AKP is. Who's going to challenge them? The media? Well, they've kind of been obliterated. Anyone who might have opposed Erdogan in the military has already been arrested. That happened a long time ago. So here we are. Democracy in Turkey. It was one of the shining jewels of that region.